Just not getting it.
He already has a cane and
hell, they could find out he fucked a midget and they try to impeach him for it.
well, that was illegal, fine. But I mean, you're talking having Russia interfere in an election. That's treasonous. And
I agree.
You should be hung from a tree, which that's the
be surprised.
only crime in the Constitution that is defined is treason, and that actually calls for being hung.
I just know I tend to learn a long time ago you just got to sit back and let things shake out a little bit for a while.
Everything's gonna shake.
You got to let it shake out for a while. And then, like I said, he blew the immigration deal.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I wrote Mary Sanchez about that the other day.
I'm sure he's going to do another executive order and amend it.
He said he would have one this week that complied with the Ninth Circuit's promise with the first one. Yeah. Which I think is hilarious. I'm like, so you're admitting that you put forth a shit ass bill that has no chance of surviving? Like, and you know who actually wrote it? Chris Kobach. The Kansas Secretary of State or whatever it is.
So see, you also got the main thing I had a problem with the immigration issue is that, okay, you say you're going to build a wall or surveillance system, whatever. I think it's like I said, surveillance system is a better way to go. And then you should have come out and said to business owners that are using immigrant labor, look, people are here. Well, you need to sponsor these people. Let's get them work visas and bring them out of the shadows.
It's a lot of money to do that, though.
Yes,
$7,000.
yes. But you've got businesses involved. Okay.
I don't understand why they don't do what Reagan did.
Yeah,
the amnesty. Reagan was the biggest amnesty giver of all time.
Amnesty. And so you get them to do that. Now you haven't scared them. But since he went out and started getting the thugs first and then started having collateral damage when somebody was just illegal there, now he's scared all of them to death.
I agree with you 1,000%. I think you're right on track on that.
So now, even if you try to get them work visas, are they going to come out of the shadow? Shit, no, they're afraid they're going to register for work visas. They're going to get hauled off.
Nah, they're going to fucking hide like anybody's business. They're not going anywhere.
So now you create this culture of fear.
You know, this
poorly
is
done. Poorly done.
Wrong thing to do. I completely agree.
And it really hasn't even been a policy. That's not even an executive order yet. I don't think it's just something that they can do because.
The law?
I don't think he's even had an executive order on immigration yet, has he?
Well, he's had
two. Well, the travel.
One was struck down.
Travel, but not.
The wall is also an executive order where he ordered it to be built, and Paul Ryan promised that Congress would provide funding for it. So him passing the executive order to say we're going to start building a wall actually means nothing because he doesn't control any money. But then he had Paul Ryan come out and say Congress will fund the wall.
That was already a law that was approved, though. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Obama, Hillary, and Biden all voted for it.
The wall?
The wall.
The wall has never, ever been approved ever congressionally. So, no, this is a first. What they did vote for was to strengthen border security with more agents, potentially build more fences where there were gaps in the fence lines and things like that.
That must be what they're talking about.
A wall.
Yeah, that's what they voted for.
That's very different.
But they did vote for a similar measure in that aspect.
You know what? Since we've already jumped in, let me just jump in.
Let's do it.
And then we may still be joined by one or two people, but we will announce them as they come along.
Oh, wow. Holy crap.
And and there's quite a bit to get to because there's been a lot going on this week, obviously. And with that, welcome everybody out there in podcast land. The Good Times with Good People Company proudly presents the Loft Party Podcast, where it is always about good times, good people, and good talk. Good. Now that you've received your invitation, join us. Grab a cocktail, light a cigar, or whatever you like to smoke. Tell a friend, and welcome to the party. I'm your host and moderator, Rio, and let's introduce today's panel. Right now, we do have a small panel, but I think there may be one or two more people joining us. Of course, our defending champion, Chris O'Connor. He's the co-owner of Liquid 9 Broadcast Media Production. And Dave Elliott, we like to call him Big Dave. He is the owner of C&P Construction. Today, I know for all of you anonymous female fans out there, you are going to be sad, so we're going to go in with a resounding She's not going to be on the show today. She's got some family things that she's got going on. But we're going to jump right in. Loft Party Podcast episode 46. I quit. You're fired. Stop talking. So, as we always do, we're going to
making my head hurt.
So we're going to start with our RIPs. I think some of these have happened already. I don't know if they were this week, but I happened to notice them, and I thought that they should probably get mentioned. First, John Hurt. He was Oscar nominated for The Elephant Man and Midnight Express. And for some of you younger listeners, he was Mr. Ollivander, excuse me, Mr. Ollivander in the Harry Potter series, and that's of course where you went to go and get your wands. So he was the guy who ran the wand shop. Two, and he passed at 77. Richard Hatch. He passed at 71. He's best known for his role as Captain Apollo on Battlestar Galactica, and he also was on All My Children in like 71.
Loved Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, I know. Which is why I was like, oh, shoot. And then last but not least, Frank Pellegrino passed at 72. He had some notable roles in The Sopranos and also the movie Goodfellas. And he was actually co-owner of the famous and infamous Italian restaurant Rao's.
He was the big guy, right?
No, he was a slimmer guy. He was a slimmer guy.
No, I'm not recognizing who he is.
Yeah.
My wife would be embarrassed of me.
I think it's actually pronounced Rao's, but a lot of people pronounce it Rao's, R-A-O. They
call it infamous is to be kind.
Yeah, they're definitely in their heyday was a huge who's who in the mob hangout, and later they just became like the most booked Italian restaurant in the country. Like it's like years waiting list to get into the Rao's, and of course they have a line of sauces, spaghetti sauces or whatever in the grocery stores.
Side of the business.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got to have a legit side.
Right.
Come on.
So before we get,
I have one more.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is a rather important one in a lot of ways, and very controversial one. Norma McCorvey.
Yeah.
All right. Jane Doe. Roe versus Wade.
Oh.
And it's too bad the anonymous female isn't here.
Yeah.
Because the anonymous female would definitely have something to put in on this.
Probably.
Basically, Norma McCorvey she had 3 children. Mm-hmm. She never aborted one. Mm-hmm. Never had an abortion. And there's another woman called, that was Roe versus, I'll have to look for
Wade.
Bolton. Doe versus Bolton.
Doe versus Bolton. Okay.
Which came at the same time. They were very similar rulings, but they were slightly different.
All right.
And both of them never had an abortion.
Well, the only reason that, to be honest, Jane Roe did not have an abortion was because the state of Texas dragged it well past the time that she had to have the kid.
But the interesting thing about her is that she basically felt like she was used as a pawn. In her latter days, she stated this, so did San Arcano.
Yeah.
She was basically not very religious at the time of all this, and then she became an evangelical Christian, and then she left the evangelical Christians and became Catholicized. And she was
used by everybody involved that could possibly have a say in the matter. Like, she was really used
on both sides
for a very long time. You know, and she was a very staunch pro-abortion advocate up until the 80s, in which case she became a born-again Christian and completely flipped her stance And a lot of people would tell you, and in fact, a lot of people have been very unflattering towards her, but she was almost entirely uneducated. And had,
she states where she came from. She was very open about that she was basically, raised in a bad household, and she was not worldly or even
yeah, but she knew
anywhere close to an educated person.
She knew how to ask for money, and she knew how to.
She also had drug issues and everything else.
She had a lot of problems.
Right.
But it was just interesting on both sides. I think a lot of people think she flipped to being pro-life because there was some financial gain there, where conservative people would pay for her to go speak. And
but that's their speculation. How do we ever really know what was in her true heart?
I completely agree with you. I can't judge what she really
This
believed.
is my whole problem with her and the way society has treated her, is that they have used her as a pawn in a way because she's an excellent pawn to use. As soon as the ruling went down, then all the abortion rights people are in the street cheering her, and
Right.
and the irony that really bothers me on this, the irony that really bothers me, is that neither one of these women had had an abortion.
Well, what she would have.
But yet they ended up being the face of abortion.
But she absolutely would have had an abortion had she been
She
not
may
had
have.
the state of Texas drag the case out.
But you
on
still got to
purpose.
recognize the irony behind it.
I don't think it's ironic when you're legally prevented from it. I think she absolutely wanted an abortion the first time around, and that's why it became a case. And the state of Texas literally did appeal after appeal to drag it out beyond the point where she could have an abortion. Because they clearly were against, the legal right to abortion.
This is the early 1960s too. This was.
Well, the case came down in 71, didn't it?
It was 60s when it started.
60s when it started. 71 was when the Supreme Court ruling came down, I believe. So,
Different times.
exceptionally different times. And I think, and I will say, and I had this conversation the other day, that I do not believe all pro-lifers are religious nuts and things like that. I think there's a very logical and reasonable case you can make for being pro-life. And then I think there's a very logical and reasonable case you can make for being pro-choice. So I don't think anybody's nuts on either side. I don't like it, and I really dislike when pro-lifers are considered to be just unthinking religious fanatics who want to deny women the right to control their body. I think there's a very legitimate argument that you can make about what defines life, which is really the fundamental question of the case. It's not about, is it your body and your right to choose? That's not the question. It's about what defines a life. And so that's why I think this is still a hot topic.
It will always be, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll ever go away as a topic. The one thing that bothers me is that with abortion, sometimes it's the lazy way out.
When you use it
Well,
as birth control,
I didn't state that right. To me, it's a way of not having account for yourself to try very hard not to get pregnant.
To make it.
And I understand there can be isolated instances where you can get pregnant no matter how hard you try. They're using IUD with a pill or a condom. A condom can break. I had a condom break on me one time, scared me to death. And these things can happen. But for the most part, that's not what's happening with abortion nowadays. I think it's just a way that society has said, I can do what I want. I have no repercussions because I have an outlet.
But I also think that we've done a lot of things to, I would say, for a woman to have a better option. So abortion is never an easy choice. And I know a lot of people throw out rape and incest and yada yada. That accounts for slightly less than 1% of all abortions in the United States. So really we're talking about 99% of people using it as birth control in some fashion. And I'm not a pro-lifer by any stretch. I think theoretically it makes the most sense. In practice, it is a horrible thing. And if we decided to eliminate abortion, it would cause mass chaos in this country and it would be awful. But I would also throw out that if we're going to do that, then we need to give women more options that allow them to, one, prevent being pregnant in the first place. Two, like RU486, we fought that forever to make that a legal thing, which is just the pill before the kid even remotely has a chance to become viable. Right. We should be looking into more things like that and providing them free because abortion disproportionately affects lower income people.
And psychological effects. You live with that abortion all your life.
Sure,
Absolutely.
and
And
that's
I
true.
really think that, I haven't had a person very close to me that had one.
But something like the RU486 pill, where that child never would be allowed to evolve to the point where it even remotely came close to viability, would go a long way into minimizing the psychological impacts. Because you don't know, honestly, if you're pregnant or not when you take the RU486 pill. You're just going, holy shit, I just had sex, and I need to take the pill.
And we're three dudes sitting here saying, do we really know what's in a woman's head in that situation?
Yeah. Well, but I also don't think it's just.
I think we've been around women enough that we have somewhat of an
I don't think
opinion
it's
on
just a female issue, to be perfectly honest, because
it's a male issue. I would be very distraught if I had a girlfriend got pregnant, and all of a sudden I decided, I want that kid. That's my kid.
well, the flip side is,
And then she turns around and goes has an abortion. I think that's psychologically for the male a difficult experience also.
Well, I think the flip side is just as bad, where you are a guy who does not want to have the kid, and she does, and you're on the hook, financially and all that other stuff for the rest of your life. That's a different scenario too. So until a woman gets pregnant on her own, God bless her, then it will become a completely female issue. But until that point, I think it's reasonable for guys to have an opinion on the matter. It is not just woman's body, woman's choice. Actually, two people were involved in creating a child.
It takes both of us to make it happen.
That's exactly my.
It's a hell of a lot of fun making it happen, but
And so my feeling has always been, and this might be slightly unpopular, but if I knew that the weight of the responsibility was going to fall on me, being a female and being the one who would have to carry the child and do all those other things, then I would exercise extreme caution at that moment. And I'm not excusing guys. What I am saying is, when you know the responsibility is mainly going to fall on you, then I would really think hard about what I was doing at the time. Now, again, not excusing guys, but the fact that we have, from that moment on, no say in the matter, regardless, really does bother me quite a bit.
I accuse this. You know my stand on this. I feel it relies on the man first and foremost.
I think it's not.
To not make a child, which means you have to wear a condom.
Well, no. There's 1,000 women who will tell you they're on birth control or they're not, and all that other kind of stuff.
But that's an old school view too.
This is probably the oldest conversation. It's not even on our list, but it is just one of those interesting things that's probably worthy of an hour-long conversation on a podcast. But
absolutely.
It is not a one-sided issue. It is not wrapped up in ridiculous religious values and people are just crazy. There's a logical side for both arguments, and it's just a matter of what you pick.
Yeah, and honestly, I guess I feel fairly similar. At the end of the day, like you say, I think abortion disproportionately affects low-income communities in general, and usually that goes to a lack of education and a lack of resources. And so when you find yourself in the position that the woman is pregnant, now, like you say, you as the guy, you fall on one of two sides of the fence. Like, oh wow, like you're gonna have a baby, or oh shit, you're gonna have a baby. And once the two of you discuss it, which is the first thing to me, like there shouldn't be any unilateral decisions if you absolutely know who this father is.
It is a unilateral decision.
Well, and I think that's the thing, that it is a unilateral decision. But I think if you know who the father is, there shouldn't be a unilateral decision. It should at least be a discussion.
But a discussion when you're not a decision maker is nothing but a discussion.
Yeah, well,
and that's
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I think at the end of the day, we find ourselves not necessarily being the decision makers there. But I still stand by the fact that even though I'm not the decision maker, in this moment, there should be a discussion, because
I'm in discussion.
I don't want to, because look, at the end of the day, something happens, condom breaks, whatever, and this woman's pregnant, and now she goes, and I want to keep it. So now, whether you were in a relationship with this woman or not, and
it's kind of her choice at that point,
right? And you have the legal.
Choice,
she's carrying the child,
right? Exactly, and it's your responsibility. And that's a lot. That's a lot to say for at least the next 18 years.
Yep, legally.
Legally,
even longer. There's statutes in most states that say if your kid decides to go to school, you're responsible until they're 21, and all kinds of other things that come along with it, and many things. So it goes beyond 18 years in almost every state. But what I would say is, I do believe that there should be some sort of, I don't know what it would be, a consideration for if a guy wanted the woman to have an abortion and she chose not to. I think the guy should have some sort of a break on this, because let's be honest, like, women don't have sex not knowing what the responsibilities and repercussions are. And I know that if it was me that could become pregnant, I would definitely be thinking pretty damn hard about whether or not I wanted to be impregnated or not.
What about some kid that doesn't think he can even support her?
Oh, absolutely.
That's the worst thing. I'm saying, I'm just a struggling idiot out on the street right now. How am I going to support this child or this woman?
Sure. And I can tell you that, honestly, if guys could become pregnant, like, everybody always makes the joke, if guys could become pregnant, abortion would be legal in a second. I don't know if that's true or not. What I do think is, I know I'd weigh the consequences of having sex a lot more seriously than I probably do now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And also, I think that there should be exceptions to the rule when you were lied to about something being on birth control. Birth control does not fail. That's nonsense. Yes, every now and then a condom can break, but birth control really does not fail. The percentages are so low.
So
once
like
again,
1%.
When people talk about that, we're getting back to the fraction of a percentage of abortions that happen in this country. They generally happen because we're using it as a form of birth control, and that's all it is. And that I find a little bit bothersome. And again, I'm pro-choice, and I believe in abortion as just socially we would not be able to survive without it. And in fact, if you ever read the book Freakonomics, everybody gives Giuliani so much credit for the dropping of crime in New York City in the early 90s. The guys who wrote Freakonomics, Stephen Levitt being the chief one who came up with this theory, but he traced it back to the legalization of abortion, where lower income people were now allowed to be able to have abortions of kids who would have grown up in poorer environments and maybe tended towards a life of crime and things. And if you think about the timing of it, 71 to 91 they would have hit the age where they would have been committing crimes and doing things like that, and there were just far fewer children in that environment at that point, so the crime rate dropped due to that, which was super interesting. And they went through all kinds of stuff. The police changes they made, blah blah blah, would have accounted for a certain percentage of that, and that's great. But really the main driver of it was the fact that legalized abortion meant there were fewer people growing up in poverty to be able to commit crimes and have that lifestyle.
That's an interesting thought too, because it also evolves into something on a greater scale that has no really religious factor to it in any kind of way at all, and that's the population of the world right now.
Oh yeah.
You look at China, all of a sudden they're eliminating to one person, and that's how they ended up with all the girls that got adopted into all the countries, because they all kept boys, because the boys had better chances of being wage earners.
Yeah.
And being able to take care of the traditional family, because you're supposed to take care of your parents when they get old in China.
Yeah.
So, and you look at this all over the place with the population boom, and, that's kind of a weird way to look at it, but
Yeah, it's interesting.
do you want to bring your kid into the world? But anyway, I know we need to move on to some other subjects.
We do, but I know you and Jackie were, sorry, edit that out. I know you and the anonymous female were talking about the other day about the documentary 13.
Yeah.
And its opening line is pretty amazing, where it describes that America has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's criminals. Which is a fascinating thought.
25%.
And then you start to think how legalized abortion would or would not affect that and those kinds of things. So anyway, getting slightly off topic, but they're all tied together. I do.
I do believe. All right, so before
it's an amazing subject.
Before we go forward, we are being joined by I like to call him young Padawan, Mark Kulik, and he brought a friend. And your name is?
Steve Burton.
Steve Burton. What do you do, Steve?
I work at BR Architecture.
And for the audience, what do you do, Mark?
I work in real estate.
Okay, all right. Please have a seat. Join the panel.
Steve.
Nice to meet you.
So
David,
Mark.
About to say Dave and Chris. And so, actually, you are coming right at the right time because we were just on a topic and we're getting back on track.
we tend to get off on
that was my fault.
From time to time. No, it's okay. As I wrote here before we get started, I want to touch on a couple things. The anonymous female found this podcast. It's only 8 or 9 episodes deep, but I thought it was really interesting given the political climate today that there's a podcast that is dedicated purely to giving America a very much needed civics lesson. And the podcast is called Civics 101.
What do you mean? We don't need no damn civic lesson.
I think we do.
Okay.
And it's an NPR podcast. I'm not here to plug it, but it is actually very interesting. And they're short. They're only like 15 minutes long or so. Mm-hmm. But if you really ever want to know, what powers do, this
you're
particular
legally entitled to do.
Yeah. Like, what powers does this person in the White House have, or how does a bill become a law? And of course, you haven't seen Schoolhouse Rock growing up.
Or what's the purpose of an executive order? And what credence do they carry legally and things like that?
They're basically teaching them something that they should have learned in school.
Absolutely.
That we did learn in school.
Yeah. Well, and I think the problem now is they've trimmed so much. In the trimming, it's trying to cram as much curriculum in.
Sure.
So you don't get in depth on any subject anymore. But I guess that is the beauty of the internet and of living out here in podcast land. You can learn quite a bit. Actually online if you're not looking at cat videos all day. Sure. One more heavier topic before we get into Trump talk, and that is I don't know who here at the table remembers or knows about the murder of Emmett Till. That was
absolutely.
That was
I think everybody knows
60 years ago. So what was said was Emmett Till whistled at the time, whistled at a white woman, and that basically got him murdered in the South.
Not just murdered, tortured.
Oh yeah,
tortured and
tortured and
he got tortured first.
And that was in 1955. I actually included something that I really thought long and hard about including, but I'm gonna say this, and then I want everybody to look at the picture. I think the thing people tend to forget about Emmett Till is that Emmett Till was 14 years old. He was a child, and he was tortured and killed. And what I included in, I bake up these packets every week for the people in podcast land out there. so that everybody at the table can kind of be on the same page. One of the things I included in the package is Emmett Till's mother and wanted his funeral to be open casket so that people could know what happened to her son. And the picture I included is a picture of what Emmett Till looked like in his casket after his torture and murder, but what he really looked like also at the bottom, as a 14-year-old kid. So you can see, it was far from possible that he was doing anything threatening to anybody, and he got killed for it. But it's a what is the right word? Sad and happy day. That here very recently, the woman who accused Emmett Till has, after all these years, recanted her story and said finally that the whole thing was a lie.
How on earth could you live with yourself for all this?
Well, and that's what I was thinking. She was living with herself for 6 years.
There's a little backstory on her. Yeah. Is that how much she was pressured by her husband, who was kind of an abusing bastard too. This wasn't on her totally.
No. I do believe
she was coerced into this.
I do believe.
If you read the backstory on it, I read the backstory on it after this came out, and she's certainly a guilty party as much as any of the rest of them. They were all guilty parties in ways.
But I do believe that she was basically. He left out of a general store, and I think what he actually said was something more akin to bye bye.
I think it was a place that sold TVs generally.
And the other thing too was Emmett was just visiting some relatives down south. He's originally from Chicago.
Yep.
So he didn't know that you just don't speak at that time. You just don't speak to a white woman at that time. You just keep it pushing. And the fact that he spoke, the husband and I forget who the other guy was, was like, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? And kind of pushed her into saying that he said something inappropriate. And of course, it ended the way it ended. But that was my first thought, was, living with something like that for 60 years. How could you live with that?
She had to have a come to Jesus moment. I mean, she had to, I can promise you, as you get older, you start thinking about things.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure.
And you start thinking about things and you go, I need to get square.
It's funny. I remember when the movie 42 came out.
Yeah.
I had a supervisor, really nice guy, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, actually. There was a scene in the movie. It was a young kid. He was probably about Emmett's age, and they're at the baseball game, and they're screaming profanities and calling them the N-word and everything else under the sun. And the kid, who was just there to enjoy a baseball game, he sees his dad and probably his uncle or whatever doing it. And he's looking around, and then he starts, because he thinks that's what you're supposed to do. And I remember getting it was an oddly heartwarming. It was a kind of one of those confessional moments where my old supervisor was like, that was me. When I was that age, and say, where I'm from and where I grew up, and I didn't know any better. And of course, like I said, now he's the nicest, most God-fearing man that I've ever met, but you could, and because we had built such a rapport over the years, you could tell. And that's one of the things we bonded over. We always talk about movies. So like every Monday I come in and we'd be like, did you see any movies this weekend? Because he loves movies, and so do I. And so he'd be like, oh yeah, did you see 42? And I was like, yeah, I did. And so that came out, in that conversation, and and it was one of those things that, I've never thought, like all anybody is bad. I think there are bad actors and there are bad moments. But we
all are bad actors and have bad moments.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But and there are some just raging assholes that are just.
Let's have a little social experiments here. Now we got a couple younger panelists.
Yes.
Were you ever taught about Emmett Till?
No.
Were you ever taught about Emmett Till?
No, and also another one that I was never taught about, but that I had found out about Emmett Till right now. But the Tulsa Massacre of 1921 was another one that isn't really taught anything about, and that actually begs the question for me, like how much does recognizing these things 40, 50 years after they happened really effectuate change? In the example of Tulsa, the city finally decided to investigate what happened in 1996. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change the fact that a really affluent community was destroyed in 1921. Doesn't change much, in my opinion.
Well, it doesn't change much, but I will say this, and I've been saying, there's been a push for years for reparations for the descendants of slavery, and I wrestled a long time whether or not I thought that reparations were a good idea, or if they were necessary. Or what I will say is, I don't know if suddenly now giving me the 40 acres of the mule that was promised is great. If that, I don't know if that does anything for me now, but the recognition, the formal recognition of the act does mean something.
I believe that's an important thing too.
Yeah.
And I also believe that what it does do is create a scenario where A, more people are aware, B, you have alternate means of trying to make reparations. I don't believe that giving money away to people who were generationally from slaves would make a difference. But what I do think is it does things like it pushes for affirmative action, where I think a lot of people, myself included, would say you can't deny an entire race of people an economic opportunity to build an infrastructure. And that's why I think you do see things like, maybe it doesn't do a lot, but what I do think it does is you start to get things like affirmative action, where we say, okay, let's, instead of giving out money, let's try to make programs that balance the inequity in the economic situation that they face. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Again, a lot of people would blame the housing crisis on the fact that there was a law in place that made bad loans in that case. But I do believe things like affirmative action are exceptionally important, because it gives disadvantaged people the right to try to build an economic infrastructure in a community that would never otherwise have that ability. Who've been systematically denied that ability for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I do believe in those programs, and I think they should continue and should be enforced.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot in the past year or two, especially past year. There's been a lot of online stuff about like Buy Black and stuff like that, and I remember having this trying to have this conversation with somebody else that was another black person, and they were coming at it from a militant standpoint. We need to keep money in our community, so we need to buy black. And I was like, that's just a piece of the puzzle, though. I said, no, it's not a bad piece. But I said, but this is really what it is. It's about community building. In any real community, there's 3 pillars.
You're missing the point a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
And I think it's I think they're hitting the point and not even knowing why they're hitting the point, which is just as bad to me as not knowing what the point is at all. Because so you bank black, buy black, invest black, not because you're doing some militant action, but because in community building, if you're putting your money into institutions that will give you a loan when, let's say, Bank of America won't,
sure.
Then you can do the second thing, which is spend that money in stores that are owned by people that have your better interest at heart, and then because economically you've got your bank, you've got a banking system. You're spending money in these, retail arenas. Now you can do the third thing, which is probably the more important thing, which is invest, and that's also a community piece. If you go into Chinatown or Greek town, if you're in a larger city, there's every single business is owned by a Chinese family or by a Greek family or by an Italian family in Little Italy's.
But they want to depend on the overall public,
which is what I mean. At the end of the day, if your community is strong, then it's not that you're, which is the reason that I kind of rejected being a militant action. If your community is strong and you're selling good products and good services, and then everybody's going to want to come to that community and spend their money and their time there. Just in the same way, we'd all go to Chinatown, or we'd all go to Little Italy, or we'd all go to whatever community.
Well, we have a problem here in Kansas City of a similar type of fair, because we have this wonderful jazz and blues heritage, but 18th and Vine continues to suffer, and it's a money pit that they throw people in. And I happen to know Donna down there who works at the Jazz Museum, or Danny and Gene, who used to have Danny Big Easy until they told too much cocaine and really screwed up.
That's an accident.
Very disgusted with both of them because they really had a good thing going on there with their music and everything else.
Right.
They blew it. But the point, we had several conversations with some of the people I've had down there, is that they need a management system to go in there to turn that into like a Beale Street type of an affair, that it has that potential and has always had that potential. And they haven't been able to reach out and say, hey, we need help.
Right.
They've tried to keep it with the minority ownerships, and they just can't get it done there. And the overall consensus is we need overall multiracial investment into 18th and Vine in order to bring 18th and Vine and make it what it has the potential to be.
Well, first off, 18th and Vine is a misnomer, because it was always 12th and Vine, and they fucked up 12th and Vine so bad. In fact, the song about Kansas City is about 12th and Vine, not 18th and Vine.
No, I know, but it's still the cultural center.
But even beyond that, so let's take 18th and Vine. You have 4 blocks of just absolute shitland that is between where you would consider the eastern edge of the crossroads.
At the crossroads. It needs to be connected.
So there needs to be development in
Absolutely.
between the two to make it not just a destination place, but a place that's integrated
But a
in the
connection.
city. That would be nice.
Michelle and I have been total proponents of that.
Everybody's a believer in that, I think, but it's just a matter of getting people to develop that land and make that work. So
But
instead of getting TIFs to people who want to go in the crossroads, the crossroads is already doing well. Why don't you push them further east and say, let's make a connection between these two places that are historically significant to our city, and actually define a lot of what our city stands for.
Right.
And so you can literally walk from 20th and Main Street at the Rieger and go down to the Blue Note or wherever you want to go, and then it's okay. I mean, I used to run this every day. I did the same 5K every day, where I would run from basically what's I-35 and Southwest Boulevard to 18th and Vine and then back. There's an enormous 4-block area where you ran a lot faster just to get through it, and you didn't necessarily want to be there. No. But if they could connect the two economically, then I think you have a very viable community.
Yep.
And that's always been the biggest problem. It is an island that sits on its own, that is surrounded by, honestly, places.
And the city just keeps pumping money into it, And my question to the city is, where's your accountability for your money?
But you can't let the area die.
The money's going in pockets down there, and I built houses down at 27th and Montgall and Benton.
Yeah.
And it was on the take so bad down there.
Yep.
And I mean, to not say it wasn't is a lie.
No,
Because it was, and this is where the problem is down there, is that there's too many people on the take that are able to siphon some money off while they do this, and then they put their pocket into it.
Which
Which is that bothers me. That bothers me because Kansas City has come along so far, and that is a true cultural center that we should just worship. I mean, you go down to Musicians Guild and sit around and listen to some music. We got some unbelievable musicians in this town. We got some great music in this town.
Yeah.
And it fails to be developed. Of course, the whites won't come out in the suburbs because they don't feel safe down there, which I've never had a problem down there. A couple times where it's a little iffy, but for the most part. I go to the gym. I mean, I go to all these things.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem down there. But it could be so much more. You just see that potential.
Yeah.
You see that potential there.
Yeah. And going down to the foundation, what used to be the Musicians Union, which is great, which is now BYOB, which they can stay open late and do all those other kinds of things. It's a phenomenal experience. You don't necessarily feel super safe leaving at 5 a.m. from there, though.
No.
And good luck getting an Uber out of there. And so that's the problem. I think if they really were able to develop those 4 blocks that separate what is now the Crossroads and 18th and Vine, I think you would see a lot of development start happening.
I agree.
It'd be really cool. And I do believe the city should continue to support that district in the in-between, while putting, if it's me and somebody's asking me for tip money, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to tell you exactly where to put it. It's just on the east side of the Crossroads, and let's develop this area.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Are we ready for Trump talk?
Always ready. That's the best talk in the world.
All right. So let's just jump right in. First kind of bullet point I had down here is Trump has officially said that the media is the enemy of the people. I thought that that statement in particular, besides being ridiculous, is dangerous and irresponsible. But to me, that sounds an awfully lot like the way dictatorships begin. And not to say that we're suddenly about to, have a dictator tomorrow, but I think Trump has, and I'm purely basing this on things that he's actually said. I think he's studied and admired dictators over the years, and he's doing a lot of things that are directly out of the dictator handbook, and one is either the suppression or discrediting of the media, so that basically anything that's not praising you, is fake news.
Although you get, you get news stories, right, that permeate, that are like the one about him being urinated on by young Russian women in his spare time. I mean, there's a lack of evidence to support those. So when they start getting across mainstream media, now you have a question of what's being reported, and if I think Facebook came out after the election and said that they thought Trump won because of fake news. So it's not just the problem with the media isn't just a Trump thing. I think that there's a larger picture problem that is representative of the political spectrum in America, not necessarily just Trump. That if you turn on Fox News, you're getting news that people that tune into Fox News want to hear, so that they can get ratings.
Well, now that
Same
has
for
to be a profit
MSNBC.
center.
Or MSNBC on the opposite end.
Exactly.
It goes whichever side you choose you want to go listen
No,
on.
you're right. But it used to be that news was a lost leader, for networks, but they felt an obligation to report factual news with good journalists and things. And now you have entertainment channels that are pushing stories, which I think is probably your point, where they're pushing stories that are just fit for their audience in order to gear ratings.
Well, and then you have, you have situations where CNN is offended by how Trump talks about them. So how do they respond? Well, they're going to respond by showing him in doing everything they can to paint him in a certain light.
Sure.
I think it's pretty complicated.
Are they doing that, or is he doing it?
No,
I think it's about 50-50.
I would agree. And I always wanted to think CNN was the balancer.
Yeah.
The great balancer that was...
I think
you have MSNBC and you have Fox, and then you hoped that CNN was the middle ground.
Was the middle ground, yeah.
But, I'm with you. Now that he started attacking CNN, if you're CNN, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to be pissed.
Yeah.
And go after him. Don Lemon did.
Yeah, it's actually
Well,
further.
pissed him off, but
it's actually further down on my list, but that
Don
definitely
Lemon
ties right in.
He's a phenomenal journalist with a real pedigree of being a good journalist.
Yeah.
And it's when people knowingly come on your shows and lie, and you call them out on it. Trump lied, the press conference was amazingly revealing to say, the leaks are real, the news is fake. I'm like, well, wait a second. They can't both be the same thing. If these leaks are real, they're not making up stuff.
Because the definition of fake news is it is made up to sway an opinion. Hey, what's going on, podcasters? Let's acknowledge the good friends of the Loft Party Podcast. The Majestic Restaurant and Pendergast Club, carrying on Kansas City's tradition of great food and great jazz. 931 Broadway in Kansas City, Missouri. The J. Rieger Kansas City Distillery. Whiskey, gin, vodka. That is, oh so good. And friend of the podcast and panelist, Lane Boland. Managing to keep the podcast going. Apparently wealthy or not. Now onto our regularly scheduled program.
And I think his larger point would be that they're trying to construct a narrative about his presidency by selectively picking which stories they're telling, and that would be an issue.
Yeah. So, now, and I can go with that.
I feel like it raises red flags when, like in his responses back to people, if he tunes out reporters, who are pointing out legitimate things like you're mentioning, and labeling everything as fake. Sure, there's fake news, and certainly people have been reporting when they shouldn't have, but for him to just discredit or to not take questions or to take a question from someone and then respond by not addressing their question, he seems to be doing that in a much more blatant way than we've seen before.
The fact that he will not directly answer a question is a real problem. When they ask you literally just yes or no, did anybody that you know of in your campaign have anything to do with talking to Russians? And he responds by talking about the ratings of CNN. And it's completely unrelated, and it goes off on this path that doesn't answer a question. What are you left to report on? The idiocy of his answer, or the fact that I'm a firm believer that there will be a day where he will be impeached because of this Russian stuff, and I think he was very involved during the campaign in talking Russians. But this is just my personal feeling.
Well, that's your personal opinion.
But if you listen to the answers, he's never once answered the question. He's never answered it.
But I will also tell you that I've watched many other presidents and many politicians don't answer the damn question.
That's the art.
This the art of their deal.
I think there's a difference between not answering the question and what politicians usually do.
Now,
because I think politicians usually find a way to color their answer in their favor.
He doesn't have that.
He's not answering.
He's not going to have that type of tact.
No, but that's the problem.
No, he's not answering the question, and then we're deflecting it to somebody else as if it was their fault for answering the question.
He's making it your fault for asking
when
the
somebody
question.
says, did anybody in your campaign administration talk to the Russians ahead of time? And you say,
to the best of your knowledge,
this is another trick by fake news to try to get me to do this, and your ratings suck so bad I'm not going to. I have never heard a president talk about TV ratings before.
But if he responded to all other questions in an upfront and honest manner, and then treated those specific questions about Russia like that, I'd say you have a point. But that's just his mode of answering basic questions. Like there was a question,
but that's the problem.
So there was a question. I don't know if y'all saw it. There was a question that came up from a Jewish reporter that said,
"Oh yeah, this is a big one."
It said, "All right, well, we've heard that you're anti-Semitic. I've actually never seen or heard anything that you said to that effect.
I'm the least anti-Semitic guy you'll ever meet in your life."
And then he says, "But what are you going to do about the 49 Jewish community centers that have had bomb threats in the last 2 weeks?"
Right.
So it's an interesting moment for me because I'm a conservative, and what it means for me to be a conservative is that you believe in a limited federal government with increased power to individual states' rights to police themselves.
Okay.
So if I'm Donald Trump and I get that question, I'm going to say it's a huge problem. My hope is that states and municipalities will deal with it in their own way and in an efficient way, and any support they need from the federal government, we're here to support them. But we can't overstep our limitations, and that's the end of the answer, right? That's what I would say.
Right. That's the answer to the question.
I was going to say,
Trump's not going to do that.
And
that's the problem.
You have an answer to that immediately as a president, which is, you know what? Racism and those kinds of things will never be allowed in my administration. I'll do everything I can. I find it horrible that anybody would ever judge somebody based on race or religion or anything else. It's the easiest question to knock out of the park. And the fact that he fails to do that time and time again and told the guy to sit down and be quiet and shut up because he already knew the rest of the question, I thought was just ridiculous. I'm like, do yourself a favor. Get out of your own way, because you just got served a softball and you can't even hit it.
But that's the point, right? Like, that's how he answers basic questions. And so when we start talking about, well, is it damning that he answers questions about Russia like that? To me, not particularly, because he can't answer a softball without giving the same answer, let alone a question that cuts to...
But is that not alarming in itself?
Not particularly.
How is that not alarming?
We're getting no answers from our president.
Because at what point,
Okay. And let me jump in about why I'm asking that. How is it not alarming?
Sure.
You had an answer to that question.
Right.
A lucid, clear answer to the question. You had a lucid, clear answer, and you are a conservative.
Do you not want your president to say, under no circumstances will I ever tolerate anybody being bigoted, being racist, being anything else? Like, I will do everything I possibly can to stamp it out, because that's what a president does.
And at any point that the states, and at any point that the states need my help, the power of the federal government is at their disposal. I'm like, that's not a difficult answer, but you're right. He doesn't answer any question that well, and that's, to me, because we were having a discussion before you got here. I have huge respect for the office of the president, but I don't see him having huge respect for the office of the president.
If I'm the president, that's the question I want. Oh yeah, thank you for asking such a stupid question.
So
this is awesome.
Here's why it doesn't bother me particularly, because the American people elected, because he won the primary and then he won the presidency, and it wasn't like he was answering these questions lucidly before. When he was on debate stages, the conversations got so derailed into these bizarre personal attacks. I mean, it was what this election cycle was like watching a reality TV show.
Oh, absolutely.
So we've elected this man. I didn't support him in the primaries. I did support him.
Who was your candidate in the primaries?
Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I would have. I love.
I was a Rubio guy.
I would have been a Rubio guy too.
I was a Rubio guy.
So I supported him in the general because I felt like he had a higher possibility of maintaining conservative values. And actually, to that point, I still have some hope of that. We can get to that in a second. But I'm not surprised that we elected somebody who behaved like that in a public forum, who's always behaved like that in a public forum when he was...
No, I think you're right.
Well, now I'm sitting here shocked?
I'm shocked that he made it through the entire process.
Oh, yeah.
To tell you the truth, I am shocked that he made it to the entire process.
I would ask you this, because I am hyper independent and I generally am fiscally conservative and very socially liberal.
Sure.
So, as a conservative, does it not alarm you to some degree, because I am conservative too, and I'm having major problems with the fact that he is abusing federal law all the time, overstepping the bounds of the presidency all the time. Because as a conservative, I do believe in limited government and that the presidency is not a dictatorship or a one-way street. There are federal laws in place that we all agree to. He's not allowed to make law. He's allowed to vote on a law that is presented, and that's it. And he is overstepping those boundaries so much that I fear, as a conservative, that the growth and power of the presidency is becoming enormous in a bizarre way that is violating every constitutional standard that we've had.
The thing about Trump is, and this is where I'll give him credit. He ran on a platform and he said, "Look, I'm going to use executive orders to repeal pretty much everything Obama did."
That's illegal. You can't do that. That's a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the Constitution.
Is it a violation?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it's absolutely
because when he's violating the Constitution, for instance, courts ruled that the immigration ban is too far.
Sure.
And it's not. There is, no matter what Trump does, no matter what you do in executive order,
power.
there's a check on presidential power.
But that is a legitimate presidential power to say immigration does fall under the role of the presidency, and that is a legitimate presidential power to do. What he did was he violated constitutional amendments that protect. They wrote it in such a way that it made it seem as there was a check on religion and things along those lines, which was the violation. So it wasn't that him interfering in immigration necessarily was a problem. It was that he made it a religious kind of...
No, I understand that.
What he is doing that is wrong is violating things that where the Congress has a legitimate opportunity to make a law and he can vote yes or no on it and pass it. He can veto it or approve it. It's one or the other. But he cannot make law. When it's presented to him, he can vote on it. But executive orders by all statutes are completely unenforceable when they require money, which Congress controls 1,000%, which is why an executive order to build a wall means literally freaking nothing, because that requires money to do, and the Congress does not pass it. It's just stupidity.
Well,
it's
is
stupidity.
it though? Or do you think that, from my perspective, I always thought that Trump was more liberal than he let on. Actually, to your point about being a fiscal conservative,
he totally is hyper liberal. If
you've
ever heard him on Howard Stern, then you would know that what he said, everything he's saying now is a complete lie.
But on a little bit of a tangent here, conservatives should be. I mean, what conservatives shouldn't. What the line should be for real conservatives on abortion or equal marriage should be. We may or may not agree with it, but the government has no ability to tell you what to do. So.
It's a state issue.
So that should be the response.
Is a state issue.
So as far as Trump, I think that he knows that those executive. I think he knows, for instance, it's a perfect example of the wall. Mm-hmm. I think he knows that he can't do anything.
Right.
So what he's doing is he has this base of people that voted for him. And he's saying, "Hey guys, I'm doing everything I told you I would do.
Yep.
I'm building this. I made an executive order to build this wall. There's no funding? Whoops, not my fault."
But don't you find that to be hyper stupid? Like, I don't want my president to be hyper stupid. What I don't want him to do is waste his time to say, I'm agreeing, I'm trying to enact all the things I said I would do. And I'm like, you don't actually have the authority to do it. And as a conservative, that offends me tremendously because you're not working through the system of government that we've had in place for 300 years, 350 years, whatever the case may be, since 1789, I guess. Yeah. You don't have the authority to do it. You are trying to reframe the office of the presidency in a way that is actually so antithetical to true conservative nature that it really, really, really offends me.
It's offensive, right? But again, I guess my ending is. We've had bad presidents before. Do I think Donald Trump is going to go down in the top 40 best presidents? No, I do not.
We've only had 45.
Exactly. Exactly.
So not in the top 40.
I said that intentionally. I said that the right way. he's going to be a bad president.
Benjamin
but
Harrison.
Actually, what I will tell you, he's just about what?
Just about Benjamin Harrison, who lasted 50 days, got pneumonia in his inaugural address, and died.
So what I would say though, what I would say about the Trump presidency,
exactly what he said he would do.
what I would say about the Trump presidency is that it actually gives me increased faith in our government's ability to get through poor leadership and to in the system of checks and balances that was put in place. It actually, to me, makes it just all the more genius, because could Donald Trump try and take on a totalitarian mindset? Absolutely. I don't think it's a stretch to go that far. But what I'm seeing out of our government and out of the system that was created is that it's going to be functionally impossible for him to do that.
My only issue, and I would agree with you completely, if the Democrats had control of one of the branches of government, but being an entirely Republican Congress and Senate and presidency, and now he's going to have a Supreme Court pick, which is going to make it a decidedly Republican Supreme Court. That's where the alarm bells get set off to me. As an independent, I vote for gridlock. I don't want anything to get done because I am conservative. And so, to me, like, the best way to ensure that your conservative values are upheld is to vote both people in so that nothing ever happens and they have equal powers. But the fact that they control every branch of government at the moment, and Paul Ryan came out in an interview and said, we have a plan for the first 200 days, which will redo everything that's happened in the last 8 years. And you've already seen it, when they are now allowing coal miners to dump pollution into streams. That was a repeal of an Obama order. That is horrendous to me. Once you script the environment, you cannot undo it. It's things along those lines that make me really, really, really nervous. I like it when there's counterbalances. We always talk about checks and balances in this government. That's true when both parties have some sway in the decision making, and as of right now, Democrats don't have any sway in the decision making, and that means the Republicans can do whatever the hell they want for 2 years.
At least
and
2
that
years.
scares the living crap out of me.
But you're making an assumption that the Republicans are going to vote along party lines and support everything Donald Trump is doing.
They have so far.
I don't think that they've supported everything Trump is doing. I think
with exception limited instances, they've supported everything. And in fact, you've seen Democrats not even show up to vote because they know that there's already a Republican majority.
I know that. I don't know if it's one of the things that was on the list, and I looked before I came, then I was running late. But the incident with Elizabeth Warren and the
we talked about that last week.
Yep.
Last week. Okay, it was last week. So my thing is, the Republicans unilaterally got behind his cabinet picks. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But
Scott Pruitt, you don't find anything wrong with Scott Pruitt?
I think that
they
when
did the
you
vote purposely on Friday, when tomorrow he has to turn over all the federal documents that he was court ordered to do while he was Attorney General of Oklahoma, which would disclose all of the conversations he had with oil companies. You don't want the head of the EPA. You wouldn't want to know what his conversations were before that.
Well,
they
actually,
purposely scheduled that vote on Friday because they know that tomorrow he's got to turn over all those documents, which he has just ignored every single court order until now, and he's federally obligated. He will go to prison for it if he doesn't turn them over. But why would you not say, you know what, just to be intellectually honest, why don't we hold off on this vote for a week so that we can look into some of these documents and see if he is an appropriate head of the EPA?
Because I would prefer that the EPA be disbanded, just like my issue with Betsy DeVos is notwithstanding, because I would prefer that the Department of Education be disbanded.
I would too. I think the Department of Education is a joke, and by the way, only 2% of all education funding is from the federal government anyway.
Yep.
So the federal government
state and local
shouldn't even have a role in it anyway. They should just continue to make block grants and give the states money. You don't need a department to make block grants. You just have to give out the money, and it's only 2%. It's a big deal.
Right. So pay attention to Betsy. I am hopeful that I have some reason to believe that that Betsy DeVos is pro disbanding
Oh, there's no reason to believe she is.
Well, and
she definitely wants to disband the
the
department.
funniest part of it is, and everybody bitches about no child left
he wants to
behind.
disband the EPA. She wants to disband the Department of Education. And I think what bothers me now with the Department of Education, it being, if not the newest, one of the newer departments.
Wasn't it a Carter thing to do the education? It's only been around since the late 70s.
Like 78 or something like that. So it's not as if it's been a cabinet seat forever.
The EPA I do find value in.
Yeah. Now that I do find value.
Well, who knows? Let's take fracking for example. And I don't have a ton of personal knowledge about this.
And I know a lot about fracking. I was an oil man for 7 years.
Yeah.
I fracked back in the 70s and early 80s.
So you'll be much more knowledgeable about it than me. My feelings on it stem partially from lack of knowledge, but I'll use a personal example. I was dating a woman a few months ago who is an environmental scientist, and even she, when I was talking to her about fracking, was like, peer-reviewed articles are really mixed.
Yep.
And so it's not as simple one-to-one that people make it seem like it is.
It's a global warming argument.
So who would know? Who knows better on fracking in the state of Oklahoma? The federal government or the Oklahoma legislature?
Well, but what I would throw out in the mix is that do we not need some sort of standard that says this is when it's okay? Because if every state has the ability to approve or deny it without any federal standards, all of a sudden we're in a case where it becomes impossible to have an efficient oil system that actually does fuel most of the world, make us energy independent and things along those lines. Because you can have North Dakota approve it and you can have Pennsylvania deny it, and all of a sudden you can't run a pipeline down to where you want to go, and that's a huge problem. This is why we have an EPA. And also, there should be some standards that says, listen, as a country, we're not going to allow this level. I mean, if you want to go back to the early 1900s, we were disgustingly polluted. Ask Pittsburgh how it went up until about 79. You couldn't find clean drinking water there. It's disgusting. You know, I mean, it was just gross. You couldn't live. It affected your health. It affected everything else. We've had it in Missouri with the frickin' pig swine farms, you know, and all that. That polluted the drinking water so bad, people couldn't live at that point. So that's where I do believe a federal government does have a role to come in and say, no, you can't do this. Now, as far as the Department of Education goes, they literally have no say in almost anything. They just provide block grants. And people forget every single time because they always bitch about No Child Left Behind. That's actually a Ted Kennedy bill that he worked together with George Bush to come up with and pass. So it was a Democratic-sponsored bill that everybody blames Bush for, but was really a Kennedy law. So I'm okay with Department of Education going away because I think it's a joke. But EPA, I'm like, you can only fuck up the planet one time, and you don't get a redo. And so I would prefer to see us err on the side of caution.
And along the lines of what you're saying, Mark, if Oklahoma is so reliant upon a practice like whether it's fracking or whatnot, that it would be to their detriment to get away with it, but then all of a sudden you can start having these allegations, maybe it's causing earthquakes in Missouri. Would that be then the role of the federal government to say, okay,
fracking is causing earthquakes?
Well, no,
I will tell you, fracking is causing earthquakes.
I mean,
you're fracturing. You're literally.
We are sitting on the largest fault line. We're sitting on the largest fault line in the United States.
Exactly.
I don't want some asshole in North Dakota making an earthquake here in Kansas City.
Because that could be worse than any earthquake.
Earthquake in Kansas City not long ago.
But the EPA that you're describing, that everyone at the table here seems to be in agreement on, including me at this point, because I think I'm wrong to compare it to the Department of Ed, which I would really just like to see go away. Well, we're all what you were describing and what I can support is an EPA that is radically different than the EPA as it currently stands.
But you got to go back to, and I think a lot of this with the EPA goes back to Reagan in the 80s, where they had James Watt, who was the head of the EPA, who voted to take the Grand Canyon, a national park, and allow oil drilling and development in a national park.
That's nuts.
I think that's crazy.
Most people would say that. 90% of the people out there, 99% of the people say that's nuts.
What I'm telling you is that was a legitimate And you got to remember this. This was a huge political divide in the 80s. And James Watt got kicked out of office over it because it got so bad.
Because it was an idiot thing.
I would agree, but imagine had that gone through where now you're taking national parks, and we have very little preserved land, to be honest. I mean, people think it's an abundance of preserved land. Well, it's all Western land, and that's why they think it's so big. You can only screw it up one time. You don't get a redo. Imagine fucking up the Grand Canyon. You know, one of the 7 wonders of the world, and you are completely responsible for the destruction of that incredibly gorgeous piece of land that will never be able to be duplicated again. No, I would rather err on the side of caution.
I can give you an example of that. Like I said, I was an old man, and I understand it. I worked natural gas. I did wild well fighting. I mean, I did the most hairy stuff out there. And if you go to Cheyenne National Grasslands, northwest of Elk City, Oklahoma, and you look through Cheyenne, and there's nothing but roads going to wellheads.
Yep.
And I understand that. And do I think there should have been any drilling out in the Cheyenne National Grasslands? No. There's some grasslands in Wyoming that shouldn't be. You know, you can't preserve it all.
It's grasslands,
but you do preserve a certain amount of it.
Sure, as much as you can.
Yeah, as much as you can within reason.
I would agree.
Within reason. But to go back on your deal, we do have one law in place that was probably the best law that was ever written as far as environmental concerns. That's Clean Air and Water Act.
I would agree.
That act was a phenomenal bipartisan act.
Was it not a clean act?
That did a great job, and it's still in effect, and it still is very much in play. Those laws are still in place. You know, the Merrimack River in New Hampshire was a joke. I mean, the fish couldn't, let alone Atlantic salmon swimming up it. The regular fish were dying. Sure. It stunk when you drove over it. It was stunk. It was horrible. You know, and nowadays that river has Atlantic salmon coming up, and it's clean and everything else. So,
well, what I don't think people understand is
I think those laws are in place to protect against cold waste going into a river.
No, they just undid it, and
I don't think it'll last.
As a coal mining company, you can absolutely dump your pollution into any stream that's local. And what I don't think people understand is from right where we sit, you could literally go out that window and throw a rock and hit the Kansas River if you wanted to.
Yes.
That is the 5th most polluted river in the United States.
Due to agriculture.
Exactly, due to the pesticides from the pharmaceutical companies who provide the agricultural things to make genetic farming good, which I am a firm believer in genetic farming because otherwise the world would starve to death. But having said that, it's also there's a responsibility to be able to cleanly and efficiently get rid of the waste and the side effects of that kind of stuff, and that's where they don't want to spend their money. They want to spend their money on enhancing yields, but they don't want to spend it on cleaning up waste that kills people down the line. And that literally, if you go down to the Kansas River and catch a fish and try to eat it, you will be sicker than a dog within about 2 minutes because it is so polluted. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's
and that is.
But we know where that comes from.
It's industry runoff, and that's a direct tributary into the Missouri River.
It's also
it meets the Missouri River.
Farm write-off too.
I would agree. And I always find it ironic that farmers are the biggest conservatives when they take all the farm subsidies, which are government programs and government write-offs to them. They're more than happy to live on the government dime, but pretend that they are conservative and not vote for for small government.
I have a friend, my best friend's former brother-in-law is a farmer in Illinois. He's made millions off leaving land in CRP. Because the government will give him money for CRP for a certain amount of time, then he has to farm it, and the stuff he's been farming, he lets go to CRP and gets more government money.
Sure.
Made millions off of our tax dollars.
Go to Western Kansas.
Do I think that's right? Hell no, I don't think that's right. I understand the premise of CRP is to let land go back to fallow again, and it has some merit. But to pay people that much money to do it, I struggle with that. That's a waste of taxpayer dollars in some ways.
And I'll throw out a flip side, just because again, I am independent on a lot of this stuff. When the EPA passed the law that the Department of Agriculture passed the law that all major forest fires had to be put out within 24 hours. What that did was make it so that the cycle of nature that created and destroyed the underbrush went away. And so now you're seeing when a fire happens, it's a major, major, major fire that takes sometimes weeks to put out, and it destroys so much property. If they had just allowed nature to take care of nature, they would have been fine.
Why do we burn the beautiful Flint Hills? Because it's an act of nature.
But it's not one of the most gorgeous.
Now we have to do it ourselves.
It's gorgeous when you drive through that. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
It's unbelievable after it's burnt. It's just incredible.
It's some of the most fertile farm raising land in the United States. So, I have a letter here if you need one. But it is absolutely gorgeous, though. The sight of those hills being on fire for miles, like, it'll take your breath away if you're driving through that at night.
I love Flint Hills. I fell in love with them when I was a kid.
That's where I will be buried.
Before I moved out east.
My ashes will be scattered in the Flint Hills. I know exactly where.
One thing that I wanted to bring up, kind of circling back to how we got here, related to Trump specifically, is I know a lot of people have said that he's kind of redefining what it means to be a politician, or to be a president specifically. Sure. But what kind of struck me is that that's something that has two big sides to it. Both, first of all, in terms of style, like the way we expect a president to speak, what we expect him to say and how we expect him to say it. But then, secondly, and this is, I think, the bigger issue, is what actions we expect him to actually take, and what we expect him to do or be able to do. And I think this kind of transitions to one of the next items on our talking point of, the way that he's rebranding, so to speak, his private resort as the Southern White House, which is, a bit of something that you wouldn't expect a president to do or say.
Truman did make Key West the Southern White House. But
then what I think is the more interesting aspect of this is the fact that he's visiting so much, that he's spending so much money, because one of the things that I think everyone expected of Trump is he's going to make sure that all of the books are balanced, that he's not wasting money where it shouldn't be, and now he's already spending money 12 times the previous rate.
Yeah, I mean, he's already spent $11 million on security and housing.
I don't think
in context. Well, in context, Obama spent about $11 million a year
on security.
Yeah, well, for travel and housing, the security. No, it's about. I
would absolutely disagree with you.
I bet you.
Because he's already spent that, and it's only been a month. But here's my issue with it is that. And the reason that it's so much is not only is him traveling down to Mar-a-Lago every weekend, which is just ridiculous, but you're having to secure the White House, Trump Tower, and Mar-a-Lago. But my problem with it, on top, or just on the fact that he's spending way too much money, is he's making money on it. That's the problem. The government is actually paying Trump, the Trump properties, to
the hotels
to the hotels to house, all of the security personnel and everybody else that travels.
This is a unique situation. So if I'm Trump, I would absolutely say, listen, CMO, so let's make it easy. I'll meet with you there. We're already securing the property, etc. I don't know that I have a huge issue with that. And I also know that several presidents, Eisenhower did nothing but play golf, and they had to secure all that stuff. Truman turned Key West, literally, there's still a presidential yacht down at Key West, which he played cards on all the time and would go down there and hang out.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem.
And the most crooked president of all time was Lyndon Johnson. And the three presidents that we just mentioned in the last 5 seconds, Johnson, Truman, and Eisenhower, according to a report of 91 historians ranging the political spectrum, we're all rated in the top 10 of best presidents we've ever had.
Yeah, Johnson is a question mark. I think he's an interesting one, but he is up there because of the Civil Rights Acts that he was able to pass, which were basically Kennedy bills that he just pushed through, which was good. Yeah. And he ended up being one of the most hated when he left office because of the Vietnam War and decided not to run for a second term. But regardless, he did fulfill Kennedy's vision of the Civil Rights Movement and those kinds of things. Truman, I think, by all accounts, should go down as a good president, no doubt about it. But he's not inventing this. He's not the first
No.
person
I don't
to
think
do
he's the
this.
first person to do it.
And the fact that it's $11 million, I'm like, listen, costs go up over time.
Yeah.
Like, he has every right to get that.
Yeah, but I guess my problem is $11 million in the first 30 days.
I would bet
is what's bothering
Obama
me.
was spending a lot of money.
I would bet that Mario, I'm sure that you saw that you saw something legitimate that gave prices on what Obama spent.
Yeah.
The problem with, and this goes back to my problem with the media.
Mm-hmm.
I am sure that Chris and I could equally find something from a reputable source that has a totally different number.
Yeah.
And on something like numbers shouldn't lie.
Exactly.
And that to me is a big problem with how we look at things. Is how in God's green earth can we get different numbers from reputable sources?
Yeah, and that which
that's a good point.
that is, the old saying used to be men lie, women lie, numbers don't. But now you can juke a stat to tell whatever story you want to tell, and that's like I say, at the end of the day, for me, it's not new. A president, going to whatever location they feel comfortable at to go and do work. Sure. I guess my issue is, in particularly with Mar-a-Lago, isn't that they're going down there. Is that they're going down there and they're not
So frequently?
Well, one, so frequently, but two, they're not securing it in the way you would secure things normally for the president. The resort is still open, and actually membership has doubled.
That's not a resort, though.
Yeah,
that is a country club.
Yeah, I get. But what I'm saying is, if you're going down there and you're doing presidential business, and you're sitting at a table like this in open air with 100 other guests discussing presidential business, that's where my problem comes in.
I agree with that too, though. But I do believe that the fact that everywhere he goes, all of a sudden you have an enormous protest pop up, I think adds to that number tremendously. So, for example, when Obama would go to Hawaii, you didn't see reports of enormous protests all of a sudden in Hawaii where you had to guarantee his safety and do all these other things and bring in extra resources and yada. Every single time he goes to Florida, there's an enormous protest in Florida where you have to bring in all this extra security to try to prevent some crazy asshole in the crowd from trying to shoot him. And all of a sudden it's like, well, listen, I mean, like, sometimes circumstances are what they are.
Yeah.
He's not a popular dude.
No.
And I get that, but doesn't mean he's not the president, and the office of the Secret Service is there to do nothing but protect the president.
No,
so
absolutely.
they have to spend the resources.
Yeah, no, I'm not mad at the resources being spent.
It's
not. The numbers are just.
You're mad that it's almost like a pay for. We accuse Hillary of pay for play.
Exactly.
Right.
And now you have a situation where if you pay $200,000, you can get FaceTime with Trump while you're at the
and
that's my problem.
Now is that but is that my question? And this is something none of us would know, right? But when you're paying $200,000, is it like when you pay an athlete to give you an autograph and they stand there, take a picture with you, and you have this exciting story? Or are the people there because they're so powerful and so wealthy? Are they getting $200,000 to access Trump and say?
I would say yes.
I would say that's probably is closer to the
truth. If you looked at the Clinton administration and the people that they took money from, it was one. My problem was that it was global and it was ridiculous, where they were getting all kinds of foreign people talking to them, which affects Americans' foreign policy, and I think that's horrible. But then you would just, if you wanted to isolate it down to a local level, take David Katzenberg, who was an enormous Hillary supporter, was giving her all kinds of money, right and left. Mm-hmm. I believe it affected the way the FCC did their job, and he absolutely got special favors for doing that, and that's the way that the system is rigged.
And I do believe.
So people knock the Koch brothers all the time.
Yeah, no,
and
I mean, look,
I grew up across the street from them, and like they're not good dudes.
I mean, you vote with your wallets these days, and those who have bigger wallets have larger access. But at the same time, being able to go to Mar-a-Lago and get a handshake and a photo, even a 5-minute conversation is one thing. When you have an international incident happening and you don't take that meeting to a secure location, you're still sitting at dinner in an open area, allowing people to take pictures with the dude who's carrying the nuclear football. That's a problem for me.
That's a very fair point, but I also think that you have a million incidences of people who have had conversations that they thought were private, not realizing that their live mic was still on.
Oh, yeah.
That went out. I'm like,
well, let's go back to one factor that's not getting totally admitted.
And he's a smart dude when it comes to the media.
Prime Minister Abe from Japan and him did leave the table and go inside to finish having a discussion about something. They were having a general discussion, and they kind of like, well, we got. Let's put it in some context. They had some stuff that was aired out in public, but they also, it is written and noticed that they went back inside to have a more secure conversation in private area. So it's a little bit of give and take and something like that. He probably shouldn't have said some of the things he said out there, because obviously some guy tweeted out that, oh my God, they wouldn't believe what I just heard, who is no longer a member at Mar-a-Lago.
Sure. Absolutely.
Just saying.
What do you think?
I think I definitely understand Mario's concern.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's legit.
When you have that direct access and when it's not, I guess, taking into my analogy of athletes.
Yeah.
You're not paying $100, which almost a lot of us could pay $100 to shake hands with Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
But Pete Rose autograph for $500.
Pete Rose autograph $500. But only the wealthiest people.
Yeah.
With their interests protected could go to Trump, say, I'm going to give you $200,000. I want to sit down with you. I want to tell you I'm giving you this money. And now when you take money from somebody, you now automatically owe them something. From my personal life, I'm setting up a real estate investment company.
Right.
And to get that done, I had to.
Are you establishing a REIT, or what are you doing?
No, we're doing single assets for now. But we hope to grow into both get into more of a fund mentality and also get institutional funding to aid that process down the road. But for me to do that, I don't have the financial resources to do that. So I found a partner, and I have a breakdown that's good. But he has an enormous amount of say in what projects I take on and what projects I don't. And at the end of the day, I can't complain about that because it's his funding that's setting this up. So if I'm wanting to get involved in something that he says no, he has a say in that. And similarly, if Trump's getting substantial money from people, it concerns me that now in that same transaction, they're owed something. Right. But as far as using, I think he is using. I think he's done actually a reasonably good job. Thank you. And I'll give Pence credit too, but Pence terrifies me because as a conservative, let me tell you, that is not what I see the future of conservatism being.
Thanks for saying that out loud. I appreciate that. Because Pence terrifies me too.
But they're doing they're saying the right things with international leaders. Being Jewish, Israel is near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
And excellent. And the way he handled Netanyahu and the settlements, I thought was absolutely commendable. He said, he established rapport with Netanyahu and then said, by the way, the settlements stop.
And Netanyahu, I think, was pretty cool about the whole thing too, and came back and said, listen, obviously there was some problems with the Obama administration, which I think is an understatement to say the very least. But they know too that Israel definitely knows that there's going to have to be some sort of mediation. But at the same time, when you're constantly under attack, you're constantly under barrage, you have to be able to defend yourself, and at what point do you draw the line? So I think the settlements are nothing but, in a weird way, a bargaining chip. to say, okay, we'll cut off settlements if you stop bombing the living shit out of us every chance you get, and let's strike a deal. You know, like, in order to have any bargaining power at all, sometimes you have to go a step beyond where you want to go so that you have room to backtrack to get back to the middle. And I think in some degree that's what's going on in Israel.
And he's doing that. That's representative of how they're handling foreign policy in general. Pence going to I was shocked today, and I'm not a huge supporter of the EU.
Of who?
Of the EU, the
Really?
European Union. Yeah, not a tremendous supporter. No.
I'm a big fan, really.
Well, that's another topic.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
That's a separate
yeah.
topic. But regardless of my feelings, Pence going to the EU and saying, "I know what you guys. I know what the international community is saying. Trump knows what the international community is saying. Let me tell you here and now, we are dedicated to maintaining the relationships involved in the EU."
Right.
That to me is a powerful statement, and one that we have to see the action behind. You know, I think for supporters of the EU, myself not included, you'll want to see supporters to believe that sentiment. But they're saying the right things when they're talking to international leaders. Trump's bizarre handshakes notwithstanding,
Those are a little weird.
Those are a little weird, but
weird.
But they're saying the right things.
The NATO question is going to be the most interesting.
Yeah.
Because they are saying we are absolute supporters of NATO. It's been an alliance that has been, Charles de Gaulle notwithstanding, incredibly fruitful for America over time. But we have disproportionately paid, probably. And now that we're asking them to take a certain percentage of their budget and commit it to NATO if they want to keep it as an alliance.
This is what they should do.
In theory, yes. Unless NATO falls apart, which would be far worse. Because those are our traditional allies. Those are the people that we've been able to count on for years. And maybe the fact that we've been overpaying has done us more good than we realize to some degree.
To a point.
Because I'll tell you this, and everybody knocks on George Bush and going to the UN and the junior when he went into Iraq the second time. Actually, that was UN sanctioned. He got a UN resolution to do that. Clinton did not get a UN resolution to go into and bomb the living shit out of Yugoslavia, which we went to war with, and people forget in '98. That was a NATO action entirely.
You know, Hillary took sniper fire though.
Yeah, he did. She did, and it was horrible. I'm glad she's alive, but it was it was nothing but.
It's amazing.
He knew that it would never pass a UN resolution, and so I do find it a little disconcerting when liberals, in particular, who love the UN and yada yada, dog on Republicans for being so unilateral, when it was actually Bill Clinton who was the last person to take unilateral action without going to other countries. Both Bushes actually had a UN resolution and had at least to some degree a consolidation of countries that were all with them based on the UN.
Well, Papa Bush did it right as well as anybody has ever done.
He did, but I think Bush Jr. did too. If you remember, he had Colin Powell go to the UN and give a very impassioned speech with pictures, and everybody on Earth would have thought that there were weapons there, and I still believe there were weapons there.
They went to Syria.
They moved into Syria.
I think that I've said this for years. I am in the very, 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 very large minority that I think George W. Bush was a very underrated president.
I agree.
And I can go on large rants about why I feel that way. But I think history is is making me look like less of a fool than people said when I said that.
I
years ago.
agree with you. We talked about this the other day.
And on that ranking, he moved up five spots to 33. Now, granted, they have George H.W. at 20, and I'm thinking, I look more favorably.
I think it's reversed.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that's reversed. I think that H.W. was had problems that don't make it to the forefront because he was kind of in that era between. Oh, and he's in the era between Reagan and Clinton. Clinton universally recognized as a good president.
Yep. Yeah. But also Reagan, a beneficiary of the times.
Absolutely.
I mean, the best thing he did was not screw stuff up. It wasn't that he enacted things; it was that he didn't screw them up when they happened.
Absolutely agreed. Reagan, on the other hand, is probably one of the most controversial presidents. Some people think he's the worst president that ever existed, and actually, if you haven't seen the Boondocks making fun of Ronald Reagan, it's the funniest thing in the world.
Super hilarious. Super hilarious.
But you have HW sandwiched between what some people believe are two of the stronger presidents, and I don't know. Yeah, not sure that he was as successful, but as it relates back to Trump, I don't think that a lot of the things he's doing are in the same vein that some of the presidents who have done things the right way are doing. But the international community, the way that they're handling the international community so far, I would say so far so good. And maybe some of my fears are a little bit assuaged at this point. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I will say. Let me jump in.
This is getting long.
Oh yeah, we've been long. So let me jump in because there's so many other points that I had down that I want to mention that we're actually not going to be able to get to. I think with any president, history will tell the tale, whether or not they were actually a good president at the time.
It takes a long time.
I will say this. I would be super hard pressed to find that history will find Donald J. as a good president. I personally, I'm kind of erring on Chris's side. If he makes it out of the first 2 years, I actually will be pretty surprised.
Not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
But you also have to give that time.
No, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying
the first 30 days of the Trump bomb.
Well, like I say, it's
scattered.
Like nothing's impossible. Like nothing's impossible. Look, if you would have asked me, 6 months ago, if it was even possible for Donald Trump to get elected, I would have said, "You're out of your fucking mind. Are you seriously? Are you
out of your mind, but out of your fucking mind.
Yeah, out of your fucking mind." But I will say this, because trust me, there's going to be many more weeks of talking about Trump on Loft Party Podcast.
Material.
So, look, whether you like him or you hate him, this is rich material that's gonna give us life for quite some time, and I'm okay with that.
I think we can all agree.
Wait, 1 second.
I knew everything.
I'm about to say, whoever speaks next gets the last word.
I think you should get the last word.
Okay.
All right, Steve, you got it.
Don, you hear it.
Okay, so when it comes back to Trump, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about him redefining what it means, I'm really excited to see how he redefines what it means to be the president, because the fact that he is so blatant, so straightforward, it's interesting, but and I think a little bit welcome. Like everyone's excited about the fact that he is so providing so much content, so much interest, but the fact that he's taking these very bold steps, it raises some red flags at the same time. So I think that Mario, you're absolutely right that this is going to be fascinating to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like him to see him be a Theodore Roosevelt that is a insanely strong president, but within the rules of government.
Yes.
Instead of what I fear that he's going to be, which is a guy who wants to be a strong leader but goes outside of the boundaries of the institutions. So that's, I don't know. Right now he seems to be going outside of the boundaries of the institution. I hope that's not the case.
Well, and with that, we will see what he becomes. And like I say, with that, we will see what he becomes. But we have reached that time that we reach in every podcast, where it is time to end it, and I end all podcasts with the toast that started it all for me, and that is to good times with good people.